Shalom, Moadim Simcha, and Chag Sameach. On this, the final day of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, I wish to share some thoughts about the Sukkah so that its echoes shall stay with us even beyond. From Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamm, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was the Rosh Yeshiva president of Yeshiva University when I was a student there. He passed away earlier this summer. He was a very original thinker, a rabbi's rabbi, a giant of the Orthodox world in America, and he always had a unique way of understanding our traditional sources, looking at it from a perspective that doesn't immediately jump out at you, but when you hear it, you realize that indeed tremendous insight. As a matter of fact, the Mishnah in Avot that says hafochba v'hafochba, techulaba, turn it upside down, because everything is in it, is in the Torah, is Rabbi Lamm's approach. He would take a saying or a concept which we understand one way, turn it upside down, put it backwards, and all of a sudden discover greater and other insights into it. So let's dive right in. The traditional understanding of the significance of the mitzvah of Sukkah is that we are taught an important lesson about the importance of the material world. The material world is not that important. Our homes, our mansions, our palaces, our apartments, whatever we happen to live in, no matter how permanent and strong we feel it is really unnecessary. The truth is that only a sukkah is required for our existence. So therefore, we begin to learn that all of our material accomplishments on their own have really no significance, that we can live a tremendously inspired life inside the 4 or 3 or 2 and a fraction walls of a sukkah, underneath the schach with the light of the stars shining through. So that's the usual understanding that Sukkah teaches us, the transience of life and how insignificant all of our homes and palaces and mansions and apartments and whatever we live in may be. But Rabbi Lamm flips it upside down. He turns it backwards and he says it's not only teaching us that our homes are not indispensable, that our homes are not required, it's teaching us that in our homes we are not required. Because here we are in the sukkah for 7 days, and we notice that the house that we live in doesn't fall apart, that the job that we have, the work that we do, the career we pursue, the company we own, whatever it might be, survives quite well even when we are in a sukkah, because we are learning something very important, that man in the material world is not indispensable. He is dispensable. Man is not required. We can disappear, we can go away, and the whole world doesn't fall apart. And that's a very liberating concept. They're in the business world, they talk about the self-managing company, that a person who can be a CEO of a company that when they go away for a week or two, the company functions beautifully without them, that's actually a great blessing. That's actually a sign of success. And really, that is something that is liberating, because we often think we have to be on call the whole time. We have to be there, ready to go. And we don't give ourselves any time to spend with ourselves, with our God, with our family, with other things in life that are important. Rabbi Lamm mentions the Bratzlaver Hasidim have a tradition of having what's called a dead hour every day. What is a dead hour? An hour when nobody is able to reach them, when they are just alone with God, with their thoughts, thinking about where life is taking them or where they are taking life. And that 1 hour is an hour of sukkah time throughout the entire year. So that's one important lesson of sukkah. But, says Rabbi Lamm, flip that upside down into the sukkah, and now we may be dispensable in our permanent homes, but in the sukkah we become indispensable. There we become critical, because a sukkah without somebody to make kiddush in it is of no meaning and no value. And in this frame, we understand that when it comes to kedusha, to God's presence in the world, we are important partners. We are Yisrael. We are Yisrael ve'oraita v'kudsha brichu chad. We are all connected. Mika amcha Yisrael goyachad ba'aretz. Who is like your people Israel? One nation in the land. Without each and every one of us, God's presence in the world is somewhat diminished. So in the sukkah, in the place where the divine presence is felt, there we are indispensable. And on this basis, he explains a rather cryptic saying of Hillel. Hillel HaZaken in the Gemara in Sukkah says something which seems to be quite egotistical. He says about Simchat Beit HaShoeva, about the Beit HaMikdash, he's on Sukkot, he says, Im ani kan hakol kan. If I'm here, everybody's here. V'im ani kan. If I'm not here, mi kan. Who's here? Now, Hillel is not saying, hey, I'm the life of the party. If I'm not there, there's no party. Or is he saying that? It seems to be quite out of character. And then the next phrase is also difficult. He says, If you come to my house, we assume he's speaking to God. If you come to my house, God, then I'll come to your house. But if you don't come to my house, I won't come to your house. God, one almost wants to say, na, 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 na. It sounds very, it's hard to say, but it sounds very difficult to understand. We'll leave it at that. Rabbi Lamm says this, Hillel is teaching exactly what we have been saying. The first phrase, if I am here, everybody is here. He's referring to the Beit HaMikdash. Hillel was in the Beit HaMikdash when he said this. If I am here in the Makom HaKodesh, then everything is right, everything is well, everything is in place, because I see myself as a partner with God, Kvayachol, to share Kedusha and spread holiness in the world, as a member of Am Yisrael, Mi K'Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz, who is like your nation Israel, one nation in the land. So if I am here, everything is good. But if I'm not here, Mi Kan, it's diminished. God's presence can be diminished. God's holiness in the world would be diminished because one important person is missing. So in other words, we shouldn't underestimate our own potential spiritual importance. In the Sukkah, we are indispensable. And that's why Hillel continues and says, if you come to my house, which means if I invite God into my permanent house, my palace, my mansion, my apartment, whatever I live in, my overturned rowboat, whatever I happen to live in, if I invite God in there and I realize that everything that I accomplish in this material world is in the service of God, well, then I will understand what it means to be in the Sukkah. I will come into your house, Ribono Shel Olam, as somebody there to make Kiddush in that Sukkah, to make Kiddush in the world. But if I don't let you into my house, if I say my house is my doing, kochi ve'otzim yadi, my strength, my brilliance got me all of this wealth, all of this power, then I will not be able to go into your house, God, because even though I might physically be there, I will not spiritually be there, and it'll be of no significance. So that's one important lesson of Sukkot from Rabbi Lamm, that we in the material world are dispensable. God in the material world is indispensable. But in the spiritual world, we too become indispensable. We must be in that Sukkah, because if we're not there to make Kiddush, who will be? The second thought that Rabbi Lamm shared is using the framework of the laws of Sukkah to teach us a little about our job as human beings. There are three laws relating to the Sechach, the covering of the Sukkah, that first of all, it must be Tzomeach min haaretz, it must be something that grows from the earth. You can't use artificial materials or anything on your schach. It has to be branches and parts of trees, reeds, whatever you wish to use, but it has to be growing, something that grows from the earth. The second thing is it must be talush, it must be cut from the earth. It can't still be connected. You can't take the branches of the tree, bend them over and tie them and use them for your schach. You'd need to cut the branch off before you do that. And the third thing is it must be something which is eino ra'oi lekabel tum'ah, something which is incapable of becoming impure. If it comes into contact with a dead body or something which creates tum'ah. Generally speaking, kelim, vessels, excuse me, which have a definite function, are mekablei tumah, and therefore they can't be used on a sukkah. You can't take a door and take it off the hinges and put it on top of your sukkah and count it towards schach, even though it's wood, even though it's no longer attached to the ground, because the door is mekabel tumah. It's got a law of a kli, of a utensil, a ladder, etc. Those things, those three laws. So Rabbi Lamm says those three laws that apply to sechach, the human being must be the opposite of the sechach. So it's more like he's using it as a frame to teach us about the human existence. He says, first of all, the schach must be tzomeach min ha'adama. It has to come from the earth. Well, a human being must separate oneself from the earth, because a human being must be someone that comes from the world of spirit. The belief that man is simply a physical being and that it is simply biology and materialism, if you will, that defines the human experience, this is a antithetical idea to Judaism and to Torah. As a matter of fact, people who believe this believe that life is basically meaningless, and if life is basically meaningless, well, that is the best invitation to unethical behavior that you can ever hear, because basically it says, since life is meaningless, there's no judgment. If you can get away with it, if you can do it, why not? And that is the opening that the Yetzer Hara truly loves. So first of all, man must not be or must not feel that he is tzomeach min ha'adama, even though the word Adam comes from Adama, that is our source. But what made us unique was vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim, that God put into us a spirit from on high, and that is what defines us. It is not our physical existence, but it is our spiritual identity that defines us. That's number one. Number two, it has to be talush. The schach has to be separated from the earth. Man, dafka, has to be mechubar, connected. What do we need to be connected to? Our people, our history, our destiny. Every Jew must feel that they are part of an ongoing chain that goes straight back to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that will eventually lead to Tikkun Olam b'Malchut Shaddai, the fixing of the world in the kingdom of heaven. That is a crucial lesson, and it is important. I sometimes work with bar mitzvah lessons, and I always make this point because it's a crucial point, that every young man who becomes bar mitzvah should know that they are joining and they are a part of a tremendous history, the glory, the coolness of Jewish history, that they are a part of something much bigger than themselves, and they are a link in a chain that connects from the past and that must continue on into the future. So that is the second thing. The schach has to be separated. The man has to be mechubar, connected. And the third thing is that the schach is not allowed to be something which is ra'ui lekabel tuma, which is able to become defiled. In other words, it has to be something which can never become tameh. A man must be possibly defilable. A man must be capable of becoming tameh. Rabbi Lamm interprets this to mean that human beings have to be prepared to take risks. Because something which is ra'ui lekabel tuma, it means that if it touches the wrong thing, goes in the wrong place, it's going to become tameh. But that level of ra'ui means that there is a concern that it could happen. If it wouldn't be ra'ui lekabel tuma, then there'd be no danger. Man is made to take risks. Risks to improve the world, risks to improve themselves. Rabbi Lamm brings the example of the people in May 1948 in Tel Aviv who took a tremendous risk to declare a state. They didn't have experience in statehood. They didn't know what was going to be. We were surrounded by multiple times the amount of implacable enemies. Who knew what was going to be? If there was ever a moment of ra'oi lekabel tuma, possibly becoming impure, then that moment, I can't think of it off the top of my head. And yet they were ra'oi, they were willing to take that risk. And so it is with Jewish history, that the Jewish people must be ready to take risks, the taken olam, to fix the world. And in those three fashions, that a man is spiritual. We should never feel that we are simply material beings. That's good for Madonna's song. It's not good for the Jewish identity. We have to realize that the ikar, the main thing by us, is dafka, our spirituality, our not being part of the earth, but rather transcending the earth. And second of all, that we must be connected, not separated, connected to Jewish history. And third of all, willing to take risks, ru'uyim lekabel tuma. One final thought, which Rabbi Lamm expressed in the days immediately following the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War. He was basically quoting Harav Yitzchak Cohen Cook on this, so it's really Rav Kook's Dvar Torah, but Rabbi Lamm felt the necessity to say it over. As the war had begun on Yom Kippur, and at the beginning, as we know, it was looking not so clear what was going to be, the importance of peace. But do we want to achieve a total peace, a complete peace? Of course we do. But is that the only goal? So Rabbi Lamm quotes Rabbi Kook to imply that no. We talk about the Sukkah as a Sukkah of peace, Sukkot Shlomecha. And there's a strange thing. The law of the Sukkah could have been said very clearly. You have 4 walls and a roof. The rabbis don't do that. They say, yes, you can have 4 walls and a roof. Or you can have 3 walls and a roof. Or you can have 2 with a 3rd wall located a certain distance and a certain width and so forth and so on. Why do they do that? Why don't they just say straightforward, the mitzvah of Sukkot is 4 walls and a roof, 3 walls, and whatever, make up your mind? The answer is because sometimes in life we need to compromise. And when it comes to peace, we sometimes need to take a small piece. Even if we can't get the whole piece, a small piece, with an I, of peace, with an A, is preferable. So if you can do 4 walls, great, but if you can't do 4, then do 3. And if you can't do 3, then do 2 and a fraction. Less than that already is not worth anything. But you grab as much peace as you can, because peace is so valuable. And Rav Kook said further that we have 2 statements. One is that God's name is peace. Shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalom. That's in Masechet Shabbat, if I'm not mistaken. And there's another statement that God's chotemet, that God's seal is emet, is truth. Rav Kook was wondered why the difference. Why is God's name peace, but his chotamo, his seal, truth? He gives a brilliant answer, that when you speak sequentially. In other words, you say the first sound first and the second sound second, and then you complete the word. So shalom, I start with just sh, and then there's sha, and then there's l, and then there's o, and then there's m. So in other words, it's in peace in pieces, if you will. When it comes to truth, that is a seal. A seal, you stamp it, and the entire word is there, because truth has to be from the beginning to the end, inclusive of the middle. You can't have a half-truth. A partial truth is actually a falsehood. A half-truth is a falsehood. You'd have to have the entire truth in order for it to be true. But to have peace, even in parts, even if you say it, and that's why God's name, which is expressed in parts. Sh, a, l, o, m. Whereas truth has to be together. So even small little pieces of peace have tremendous value. Some thoughts to take with us as we go into Simchat Torah and throughout the rest of the year. And as we leave the Sukkah this afternoon, we should take the moral of the Sukkah together with us into our lives, into the future. Good Yom Tov.